Some headlines are designed to be seen. Others are crafted to distract you from the real story. I learned that the hard way, because while the world's eyes were glued to the release of Jennifer Lopez's new album, I was deep inside a world that album was never meant to expose. A world of locked rooms, whispered rules, and performances no audience should ever witness. And it's only now, years later, that I can say what I saw. And why I believe the timing of that release wasn't a coincidence. The job offer felt like it came out of nowhere. A single line email from an agency I'd never worked with before, but one that clearly knew my background. They didn't say where the work would be, only that it was a high-profile residence with unique operational requirements. When I called the number in the email, the woman who answered didn't waste time with small talk. She moved straight into a series of questions that made the hair on the back of my neck rise. Had I ever been in a situation where silence was required for hours at a time? Could I follow instructions without asking for context? Could I maintain eye contact for as long as directed, or avoid it entirely if told? It wasn't the language of housekeeping or event prep. It sounded more like conditioning. When I asked about the job title, she gave a vague answer. You'll be part of the household environment team. The pay she quoted was obscene, enough to make you ignore the strangeness. Before I even agreed, she told me I'd need to arrive under an alias. Not a stage name, not a code name, just something that wasn't my own. It wasn't optional. Leave your real name at home, she said. You won't need it here. I thought she was joking until she explained that all onboarding would be done with this new name and that I shouldn't expect to hear my old one spoken for the duration of the contract. That was my first hint that whatever I was walking into wasn't normal work. When I arrived in Los Angeles, a driver in a plain black sedan picked me up at the airport. He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask if I needed water, didn't even turn on the radio. The drive was longer than expected, weaving through quiet residential streets before cutting into an area where the houses sat far apart, shielded by walls of greenery. The estate's gate was unmarked. No number, no name. Just an intricate wrought iron design that swung open as we approached, like it was expecting me. The driveway wound on for what felt like half a mile, lined with hedges that blocked the view of anything beyond them. The trees swayed in the breeze, but the air around them felt unnaturally still, like the sound had been turned down. When the mansion finally came into view, it looked less like a home and more like a set. Perfectly composed, symmetrical, but devoid of warmth. The driver stopped short of the main entrance. Two people were waiting, both dressed in understated black. No name tags, no visible earpieces. They didn't ask for ID. One simply nodded for me to follow. The inside of the mansion was a sensory contradiction. Every surface gleamed. Polished wood floors that reflected the chandeliers above, gold trim on vents and door frames. But there was no sign of life. No half-empty glasses on a counter, no stray jacket slung over a chair. Even the air smelled curated, like a faint trace of something expensive you couldn't name. It wasn't clean in the way a hotel was clean. It was clean in the way a set is reset after every take. The handlers moved quickly, speaking softly, their eyes fixed straight ahead. One handed me a narrow black booklet bound in leather. Inside, the rules were written in clipped, emotionless language. They weren't about cleaning or serving. They were about conduct. No crossing thresholds without clearance. No speaking unless addressed first, no lingering in hallways. Some pages were devoted entirely to what I was not to look at. Specific instructions for averting your gaze if certain doors opened while you were nearby. There were no clocks anywhere, not in the common areas, not in the service quarters. In some hallways, there were no windows at all, and in those spaces, the lighting was unpredictable. Sometimes overly bright, sometimes dim, with no apparent reason for the shift. The effect was disorienting. Even with a phone in my pocket, I found myself losing track of hours. On the second floor was a hallway lined entirely with mirrors. They stretched from floor to ceiling, framed in a tarnished silver that looked older than the rest of the house. Walking down the middle of that hallway, you could feel something was off before you even noticed it visually. The reflections lagged, just slightly, as if they were remembering you in real time instead of showing you instantly. I learned quickly to avoid it when I could. And always there was the music. Didn't come from visible speakers, and it didn't follow any recognizable genre. It was an ambient hum, layered with strange loops and tones that felt like they were meant to fade into the background, but never quite did. Sometimes, if I stood still for long enough, it seemed to change in response to movement in the room. It was weeks before I saw Diddy speak to anyone directly. Up to that point, he moved like a shadow through the house, slipping in and out of rooms without warning. When he did speak, it was brief. An instruction to a handler, a comment that didn't seem directed at anyone in particular. Then one afternoon, I saw him walking down a corridor with a young man I recognized immediately, Justin Bieber. He looked smaller in person, younger than his public image, and there was a distance in his expression that unsettled me. His eyes scanned the hallway without turning his head, like he was aware of everything without wanting to draw attention to that awareness. They passed me without acknowledgement, but something about the way Diddy's hand hovered at the small of Bieber's back felt proprietary. Later that day, curiosity got the better of me. On a break, I pulled out my phone and searched for recent appearances of the two of them together. I found an old talk show clip, Diddy with his arm around Bieber, grinning for the cameras, talking about gifting him a mansion and a luxury car. The audience clapped, laughed, but Bieber's smile didn't reach his eyes, and Diddy's expression, when the crowd noise died down, was the same one I'd seen in the hallway. Not admiration, not pride, something else entirely. After that, Bieber began appearing at the mansion without warning. No one announced his arrival. Rooms that were normally closed off were suddenly being prepared. Curtains drawn, music switched off, lighting dimmed. Staff were reduced on those nights. If you weren't on the inside of whatever was happening, you were told to stay in the cleared zones. The night that changed everything started with a single overheard sentence. A handler leaned toward another as they passed and said, "Make sure the chair's in place." Hours later, Diddy walked by me in the service corridor. He didn't stop. He didn't slow down. But he looked me dead in the eye and said, "We're making something special tonight." The moment the order came for staff to clear the main floors, I knew the pattern. Bieber had arrived. But this time, the air felt different. Charged, heavier, like the entire house was holding its breath. I watched from the service lounge as handlers moved with an urgency they usually avoided. Doors that were normally kept locked were open just long enough for certain people to slip through. Curtains were drawn tight. Lighting was adjusted room by room, until the house looked more like a private theater than a home. I had no clearance for whatever was about to happen, but that didn't matter. I already had my route. In the east wing, behind a cabinet that most staff assumed was bolted to the wall, there was a loose panel. I discovered it weeks earlier while wiping down baseboards, an uneven edge in the woodwork, just enough to catch my attention. Behind it, a crawl space barely wide enough for an adult. I'd kept it in mind as an escape if things ever went bad. Tonight, it was going to be my vantage point. The space ran parallel to 3 rooms: the study, the private theater, and a place everyone called the performance lounge. That name alone had always unsettled me. It wasn't a term for a casual sitting area. It implied an audience, even if the audience was only one person. I entered the crawl space with my phone light off, moving slowly so the wood wouldn't creak. The air inside was warm and stale, heavy with the scent of dust and old wiring. As I reached the section behind the lounge, I heard voices, low, indistinct. My knees pressed into rough plywood. My palms rested on cold steel beams. Then the voices stopped. A door opened somewhere in front of me, followed by the sound of footsteps on bare stone. Through a thin seam in the paneling, I saw the room. The space was unsettling in its simplicity. The floor was stone, uncarpeted, the walls bare. No windows, no decor except a single velvet chair positioned dead center, bathed in amber light from an unseen source. It wasn't theatrical lighting. It was softer, more intimate, but it left nowhere to hide. Diddy entered first, always first. His movements were deliberate, almost rehearsed. He didn't look around the room. He didn't need to. The room felt like it belonged to him in a way the rest of the house didn't. Justin followed, smaller than I remembered seeing him on TV, shoulders slightly hunched. His eyes scanned the floor as if counting steps. He hesitated when he reached the chair. "Sing," Diddy said at first, his tone almost casual. Justin began softly, his voice unadorned. No backing track, no effects. It was the kind of raw performance you'd expect in a rehearsal, nothing for show. But after only a few bars, Diddy raised his hand. "I don't want to hear you sing," he said. "I want to see you perform." The air in the room changed. The kind of change you feel in your body before you consciously notice it. Your skin prickling, your pulse in your ears. Justin didn't move at first. Then his foot shifted just slightly. Another step. His movements began to form something, but not dance. Not the precise, confident choreography of a pop star. These were uneven, jerky motions that seemed to fight against his own body. From my vantage point, I could only see one side of him, but that was enough. His face was working to stay calm, but his limbs told a different story. Something erratic, almost desperate. Diddy leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching with an intensity that made my skin crawl. This wasn't about music. This wasn't even about entertainment. This was about control. A faint red light blinked near the base of the chair. A camera, not mounted on the wall, placed low like it was meant to capture every twitch, every flicker of hesitation. Then Diddy spoke again, quieter this time, almost like a promise. "You're always going to remember this moment. You're always going to remember me." Justin laughed. The sound didn't match his expression. It was hollow, strained, the kind of laugh that feels borrowed from somewhere else. I must have shifted my weight without realizing it because the next thing I knew, my leg was cramping and I was inching backward through the crawl space, heart pounding. My only thought was to get out before someone found me there. When I pushed the panel open and stepped into the hallway, the air felt heavier, like the atmosphere in the performance lounge had followed me. The foyer was just ahead, 20, maybe 30 feet. Beyond it, the front door. I moved quickly, but not fast enough. Diddy was standing there, blocking the exit. His posture was relaxed, but there was nothing casual about the way he was looking at me. The smile he gave wasn't the charming grin seen in interviews. It was slower, sharper, and it didn't touch his eyes. "Did you like the performance?" he asked. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then I saw the thing beside him. At first glance, I thought it was one of his security team, tall, broad-shouldered. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't wearing clothes. Its body was wrong, bent in ways that didn't make sense, as if its bones had been set backwards. Where its head should have been was a smooth black void, absorbing the light around it. Its hand rested on Diddy's shoulder, not protectively, but in possession. The contact made it unclear who belonged to whom. "You work here," Diddy said softly, almost conversationally. "You're part of the house." Something in me broke at that moment. I didn't remember pushing past him. I didn't remember the sound of the door opening. I only remember running until the house was out of sight. The raid on the mansion in 2024 was all over the news, but what the public saw was a performance in itself. Agents in tactical gear, drones circling overhead, armored SUVs lined up like they were filming a scene. Official reports said they were looking for drugs, maybe evidence of financial crimes. What didn't make the headlines was what they found beneath the master bedroom carpet. A thick iron hatch bolted into the concrete, leading down to a series of underground rooms. 6 of them sealed. And something else, a ballroom 5 floors below. I didn't think I'd ever set foot on that property again. But 3 days after the raid, a contact from my past, an ex-FBI logistics liaison who'd gone private, sent me a single message. L.A. 3-day job. Quiet access. Bring scanning gear. NDA on arrival. When I asked what it was about, he replied with a single word. Diddy. A black SUV picked me up at LAX. The driver didn't speak. His sunglasses were opaque even in the low light, and I noticed his headset wasn't connected to anything I could see. We pulled up to the estate just after sunset. From the outside, it looked untouched. No yellow tape, no press vans. Just a pair of gardeners clipping hedges as if nothing had happened. 2 men met me at the gate, one in a gray suit, the other in worn contractor gear. They didn't offer names. The suit handed me an NDA thick enough to make my wrist ache. After I signed, he told me flatly, "You're not working for the FBI. They've already seen what they're allowed to see. You're here to confirm structural integrity and assist with the remote lockdown system. Nothing else." Inside, the carpet in the master bedroom had been rolled back like a peeled skin, revealing the hatch. Up close, it didn't look old. It looked deliberate, the metal matte and well-maintained. A faint smell rose from it, metallic and earthy, with an undertone I couldn't place. The contractor handed me a flashlight and a handheld pulse scanner. "You're going down first," he said. "The air's been cleared. No weapons beyond this point." When I asked why, he only said, Don't bring anything you're not ready to lose. The spiral staircase beneath the hatch was narrow, the steps worn smooth in the center. The deeper I went, the colder the air became. Not a fresh coolness, but the damp chill of a place that hadn't seen sunlight in years. 20 feet down, the staircase opened into a concrete hallway lined with steel mesh, like something you'd see in a high-security lab. Every 10 feet, a drainage grate broke up the floor. At the end of the hallway stood a heavy door with a keypad. The code had already been entered. I pushed it open and stepped into a wide, unfinished chamber supported by thick concrete pillars. Light strips lined the ceiling at intervals, some flickering, others humming loudly, as though they were pulling power from something unstable. I swept the scanner across the walls. 6 pulses lit up on the display. 6 separate sealed rooms, each with its own biometric panel. There were no labels, no handles, just smooth steel and the faint sense that whatever was behind them wasn't meant to get out. I keyed my comms to report the readings, but instead of my contact's voice, I heard a faint whisper. A woman's voice. "You're early," she said. My stomach tightened. "Who is this?" I asked. She didn't answer the question. "They never come back. Once they're opened. Why did you come alone?" Then the line went dead. Something moved behind the third door on the left. A single, deliberate footstep. I backed away, only to trip over something on the floor. It was a dust-covered Sony Handycam, late 2000s model. When I pressed play, the screen stayed black, but the audio made my skin crawl. A strained male voice said, "Day 4, still no way out. The hatch doesn't respond to voice anymore. The doors are talking to each other. I hear music, low like underwater. If anyone finds this, the 6th room is empty. That's the one they use. Tell Quincy I tried." I checked the scanner again. The pulse from the 6th room was gone. The other 5 still blinked steadily. Above me, the lights dimmed for the first time. Not a power outage, a flicker, like something had passed between the fixtures. That's when I saw them. Not the cameras mounted along the walls. I'd noticed those earlier, but the ones hidden in the recesses above the light strips. Whoever was on the other side of that feed had just watched the hatch close. They knew I was down here, and they weren't sending help. I chose the route marked as leading to a filtration shaft. The air grew colder. Water dripped somewhere ahead. Then came a new sound. Soft laughter. Female and close. I rounded a corner and found a corridor lined with tall, antique mirrors. Their frames were tarnished silver. Their glass faintly rippled. One had a jagged crack radiating from its center. As I stepped closer, words appeared on the broken surface, smeared in what looked like dried blood or lipstick. They let the sun in. I turned sharply. Nothing behind me. When I looked back, the writing was gone. My reflection stared back at me, pale, wide-eyed, and not breathing.